material produced from outside sources whose works are displayed over the public internet or in public libraries, or even in our own library of research material. The intent and purposes for the use of this material in this kind of forum is exclusively for education and transformative instruction and teaching. We do not make these presentations available for financial profit. Hello, everyone. I'm Wally Wood. Welcome to this edition of the Revelation File. If you're new to this program, we try to start each show in which we're using copyrighted material with that fair use statement and declaration to satisfy the interests of the YouTube producers and other service providers of this program. So thank you for bearing with us through that. As you saw on our opening slide, our topic today is the Great Reset. And this is a topic that has been introduced to a great degree by the World Economic Forum, whose front website page on the subject you're seeing right now. And this was put forth on June 3rd, 2020. And we have the address of that particular webpage posted here that you can also copy. Now is the time for a great reset. What are they talking about? Resetting the world toward a better future. The World Economic Forum takes you on a journey into a new world being forged by a global pandemic that has turned the entire globe upside down and inside out. And as they say, now is the time for a great reset. Continuing to quote from their website, there's an urgent need for global stakeholders to cooperate in simultaneously managing the direct consequences of the COVID-19 crisis. To improve the state of the World Economic Forum is starting the Great Reset Initiative. The COVID-19 crisis and the political, economic, and social disruptions it has caused is fundamentally changing the traditional context of decision-making. Leaders find themselves at a historic crossroads, managing short-term pressures against medium and long-term uncertainties. COVID-19 lockdowns may be gradually easing, but anxiety about the world's social and economic prospects is only intensifying. There's a good reason to worry. A sharp economic downturn has already begun, and we could be facing the worst depression since the 1930s. But while this outcome is likely, it is not unavoidable. To achieve a better outcome, the world must act jointly and swiftly to revamp all aspects of our societies and economies, from education to social contracts and working conditions. Every country, from the United States to China, must participate, and every industry, from oil and gas to tech, must be transformed. Now, before I go to the next slide, again, I want you to notice what they're saying here. Every country, from the United States to China, must participate, including every industry. This is globalism. And this is a new world order coming to the forefront as a byproduct of the global pandemic. Returning to the World Economic Forum and their slide on this matter. In short, we need a great reset of capitalism. There are many reasons to pursue a great reset, but the most urgent is COVID-19. Having already led to hundreds of thousands of deaths, the pandemic represents one of the worst public health crises in recent history. And with casualties still mounting in many parts of the world, it is far from over. This will have serious long-term consequences for economic growth, public debt, employment, and human well-being. All of this will exacerbate the climate and social crises that were already underway. Continuing to quote, some countries have already used the COVID-19 crisis as an excuse to weaken environmental protections and enforcement. and frustrations over social ills like rising inequality are intensifying. Left unaddressed, these crises, together with COVID-19, will deepen and leave the world even less sustainable, less equal, and more fragile. Incremental measures and ad hoc fixes will not suffice to prevent this scenario. We must build entirely new foundations for our economic and social systems. End of quote. Repeating that last line again. We must build entirely new foundations for our economic and social systems. End of quote. This is fascinating. As long as I've been in this business of reporting world news and global trends in the fulfillment of Bible prophecy, we are now in the final phases of that development. And the world is saying so. It's not the preachers. It's not the teachers. It's the world. As I sit before you now, we're supposedly addressing either a matured audience or a maturing audience of believers, of Christians. I can tell you that as far back as 1972, when the Lord called me into this particular brand of ministry, He told me two things. Number one, read the world. Reading the world, I would hear for myself their voices and how they, in their actions, were going to fulfill His prophetic word recorded in the Scriptures. Number two, I wasn't to say a word without the documentation to back it up. And He would see to it I had all the documentation I needed. And I was in my 20s at the time, and here I am in my 70s. And God has shown Himself extremely faithful to the calling of this particular ministry that I have. I don't spend a lot of time preaching peripheries. My whole focus is the conviction that Jesus Christ is coming back in my lifetime. And I don't have to set that on a calendar date. I would know by way of the signs. There had to come a point in the history of man when the prophesied last generation would show up. And we would know it by way of the signs that would accompany that last generation. Signs that were to occur only one time in the history of man. We're not just entering, we're deep into that time frame now. And here we have legitimate, viable, highly recognized, and credible sources saying that because of this global crisis of a pandemic, this justifies the birthing of something that has been architected from generations, and that's a new world order, a wholly different, total transparency of a new world system, unlike anything the world has ever known. And it's designed to bring about a single global leader, that the national leaders, as we know them, would be subservient to this global president, if you will. And the World Economic Forum is more or less kind of setting the pace. They've just finished a week-long virtual conference, convention on this issue. And what I'm going to show you next is how the rest of the world journalism is picking up on this theme. Now is the time for a great reset. I take you to the pages of the Diplomatist, Diplomacist. And they're addressing the contribution of coronavirus toward a major reset. Headline, May 15th, 2020. Global power play after COVID-19. Status quo or change? In other words, will we return to the days of business as usual, or do we now change on a global basis? And here I provide you again the address of that particular website that you can go to Just copy it off your screen and go and read this report for yourself. Next slide, Brookings Institute. No more status quo, they said. A community-led action plan for addressing structural inequity during COVID-19 recovery. August 4th, 2020. And there's the address of their page that you can go to from brookings.edu, addressing the need for a change in the status quo. Theconversation.com. Surviving the coronavirus requires escaping the status quo together. Reimagining democracy beyond elections. Wow. Well, you talking about being bold and right out there. We're crossing a threshold, folks. And the old way of doing things just won't work anymore. Changing the status quo, escaping the status quo together. From General Atlantic, posted April 27th, 2020, a global perspective on COVID-19, the economic impact, potential recovery, and long-term outlook. And there's the address at the bottom that you can copy. As far back as program number 114 in our program here on YouTube channel, we presented an indication or a program entitled Pandemia Paranoia, Global Mindset. And I took you through a number of news sources addressing this matter of a new world, a new beginning, changes that need to be made on a global scale because of the pandemic. And whether or not you believe that this thing is real, that's immaterial. The point is, it's come forth as a major fear factor in the world. Just the presence of this thought of a pandemic has changed the world, turned it inside out and upside down. And now global leaders, decision makers, are saying it's time for a change. You can go to this particular program if you wish. I have the web page there posted for you. You can also go to youtube.com and type in the search engine there, RevFile TV. And there you will see the full collection, archive of all that we've produced in this channel that we're doing right now. Promoting an understanding of the global challenges facing humanity. That's one of the themes of the Club of Rome. And I've not spoken much about the Club of Rome on this program, but I've written a lot about it. And back in the 80s, I did some special reports on the Club of Rome. And here on this particular slide, you see not only their main address at clubofrome.org, but you also see a class photo of their staff. The next slide shows you the hub of influence and topics that they cover in their think tank research. And that's predominantly what they are, a think tank in Europe, in Rome, that was started way back in the 70s, addressing global matters, global issues, which by comparison were very minor then as they have become now. But this is a major website that if you're studying these type of things, you want to familiarize yourself with, theclubofrome.org. The co-founder of the Club of Rome is Aurelio Pecci, who passed away in 1984, but he was the first president of the Club of Rome, and he was their main spokesman at the time. And it's an organization which attracted considerable public attention back in 1972 with its first report, The Limit to Growth. And this was a report produced by MIT here in the States. And it captured the attention and imagination of virtually every leader on earth, because by way of facts that they had available to them at the time, deep research, they concluded that in the course of time, the world is going to run out of natural resources. What are we going to do then? What do we need to do now to prepare ourselves for a limited earth? And their prime solution was to limit growth. both population and production, and to cut back on our consumption rates as a people. And the best way to do that is through population control. And they had various different samples and examples of solutions along those lines. Well, here we have a global pandemic of a virus that is reportedly spreading around the world so rapidly it cannot be contained, and it is very effectively adding its voice to the population control solutions, and it's got the attention of the globalists. Well, Aurelio Peccei is on record as being not only the co-founder and first president of the Club of Rome, but he's also former chairman of the Fiat and Olivetti corporations, and he's authored 4 books looking into the future. So he carried the theme of the Club of Rome forward in everything that he said publicly and everything that he produced in the way of writings. In the Toronto Globe and Mail, dated May 3rd, 1974, he said this: "The only possible way to make these major decisions is to take a global approach. A new international order will have to be established, not just in the economic sphere, but in the social and political areas as well." 1974, he made this observation. Going forward, in the Atlas World Press Review of January 1979, he said, "A reorganization is underway by which every governing system known to man presently will be changed, drastically, dramatically, and permanently." End of quote. Now, you read this in the context of the Great Reset, and you see that the planning, the programming, the scheming, the strategies have continued down the pike from those earliest days. And there are those who predated even Aurelio Peccei himself in saying the very same thing. And now we're in the full fruition of what they talked about. Returning to the Club of Rome, one of their hubs of matters, is emerging new civilization. This is on their website, in which they say a new paradigm is essential to clarify our role as a species within the greater Earth community. Conversations are needed to agree on core values that promote human dignity, respect for nature, and protection of the commons beyond current generations. This language, everything is hidden in wording. This idea of needing to agree on core values. What core values? What are the rules? What are the standards of a new set of core values for the world to live on? In saying that these core values must promote human dignity, respect for nature, and protection of the commons beyond current generations, seems to be suggesting that the status quo of religion is not to be considered. It's old world. It's part of the drama and the trauma of our current world conditions. Of note, people go to war if for nothing more than religion. The battles between religions. And again, you can do deep research into this, as I have, and you'll find that this is the general consensus, is that religion causes war. So if we can do away with religion altogether and re-indoctrinate religious people to think more in terms of the global community and the global need without the necessity of having a God to worship, then the guarantee of peace and prosperity is more assured for all. That's the thinking. And this terminology here that we are looking for core values that promote human dignity, as if to say, religion does not. So keep these things in mind as you are wading through the world of headline news and op-eds that you may read or hear on radio. Consider the wording. Going further into this page, from the Club of Rome, Emerging New Civilization. The Club of Rome is repositioning itself to challenge humanity to rise to its full potential and become good stewards of the Earth's limited resources. Our call is anchored on the need for a paradigm shift in our fundamental belief matrix. There you go again. And the complex economic, financial, social systems underpinning our daily interactions. We are determined to identify and mobilize those already engaged in the quest for a new civilization to become part of a network of networks to pursue this vision. The exploration of a new civilization is being enriched by the responses of many fellow explorers who are engaged in asking tough questions of humanity in a variety of spaces. Common threads are emerging that affirm what we already know. I hope you're picking up on the wording. A new civilization is as good a given fact as globalization is, as far as the Club of Rome is concerned. And they've dedicated themselves for decades in the pursuit of ideas, feedback, thought, relative to a new world and the abandoning of the old world. I'm impressed with their repositioning themselves. That says that they had a previous position. Now they're moving to a different level of a new position. Their call is anchored on the need for a paradigm shift in fundamental belief matrix. That means that you throw out the thought of capitalism, of democracy, of freedom, of religious conviction. You throw those out because they're all part of the problem. And we now concentrate on building a new matrix of belief. We're determined to identify and mobilize those already engaged in the quest for a new civilization. Wow. Now is the time for a great reset. I bring your attention back to Alvin Toffler. Back when I was talking about my New World library of books, I presented this from Alvin Toffler, author of Future Shock and The Third Wave, in which he said, quote, "We are creating a new society, not a changed society, but a new society. The world that is fast emerging demands wholly new ideas and analogies, classifications, and concepts. Old ways of thinking and believing no longer fit." You see how that ties in with what I've just been sharing with you? Old ways of thinking and believing have no place in this new paradigm, this new era that is being built and pursued for the sake of the general welfare of mankind. I also remind you of something that I shared before. Time magazine, July 1st, 1974, called for the creation of the President of the planet Earth, as it gave consideration to the new era, the new changes that were coming. 1974. And they commissioned the United Nations to consider a new political office, that being President of the planet Earth. When President Obama was elected, the American Interest Journal had as its front cover headline, "The Global Election." So everything's put on a global status. The New World Order, the New World Parliament, the one world government. In Daniel 2, verse 43, we read, "In that you saw the iron mixed with common clay, they will combine with one another in the seat of men. But they will not adhere to one another, even as iron does not combine with pottery." So this will be a loosely knit world government system because of the intermixing of personal interests, family interests, cultural interests, things of this nature. They won't be fully united, but they'll be strong, as Daniel said, with the strength of iron, the strength of Rome, the Roman history. But they will be weak, just as pottery does not cling to iron, and vice versa. So the world empire, the world government that's coming and that's being discussed here, though it will be presenting itself as being strong, will be internally weak. And therein lies the call for a one-man stabilizer, so they can continue in the direction that they've created, a new world, one world system. I take you back to Daniel chapter 2. That's where the discussion of a new world order, not under those terms, but the concept, was first produced in Scripture. In the case of the prophet Daniel and King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon. And go back and read that story if you haven't done so already, because there's the foundation of the last empire that's coming. And what you've seen here today, this is not speculation. It's not conspiracy theory. Very real voices, real decision makers are at the helm of this decision that is coming soon by way of events and circumstances to justify a one-man rule over every nation on earth. This is the time that Jesus said would occur before he returned. And I can close by saying this. Remember this. Antichrist is pre-Christ. Thank you for watching. We've got more coming. I'm Wally Wood.